Hello everyone and welcome to this third video introduction to Python for beginners. So far in the last two videos we have covered some important concepts when it comes to Python, such as data types, the type of data types that we have covered, tuple sets, dictionaries, lists. We went over lists in quite some details. We looked over a few operations when it comes to lists, such as pop, append, remove. We also covered some comparison operators. We covered some conditional operators such as the if statement, the else statement, the elif statement, and we also went over print formatting, index slicing, and a bunch of other useful stuff. In this video, I'll be going over a few other important operators such as the for loop, the while loop, what is the range function, how to create a custom function for yourself, and also I would like to go over what is a list comprehension. So without wasting any time, let's get started. So let's say I have a list by the name of list1 and it contains 4 elements. Okay, I want to perform an operation on each and every one of these elements that are inside of that list. I want to basically iterate over all of the elements inside of that list. How can I do that? I can do that using the for loop. So let's say I'll start typing for numbers. I can say num for numbers in list1, print num. So what I just did over here is that I iterated over all of my elements inside of list1, and I told Python that for each and every element inside of list1 I want you to print that specific element, and Python did just that. 1 2 3 4. I can even perform some mathematical operations. So let's say for num in list1, oops, it's supposed to be list1, print num plus 2. So yes, I basically told Python that for every number inside of list1, for every element inside of list1, I want you not only print it, I want you to print it after you've added 2 to it. So that is how a for loop works. A for loop iterates over each and every single element inside of a list. It can be a set, it can be a tuple, it can be a dictionary. It depends entirely up to you. And after iterating over those specific elements, it performs an operation on that element and prints that output. It can even store that output. So let's say I'd like to go over one more example when it comes to the for loop. Let's say I define a new list by the name of list2. What I want to do now is that I want to store each and every element inside of list1 inside of list2, but with a specific operation, or you can say the specific mathematical operation performed on it. So what do I mean by that? So I'll say for numbers in list1, okay, I want Python to append that number, but not just that number times 2. So for all the numbers inside of list1, I want Python to first take the number times 2, take that number times 2, and then append that value into list2. And what do I get if I were to look at list2? I get 1, 2 power 2 is 4, 3 power 2 is 9, 4 power 2 is 16. So yes, this is how for loops work. We can play around with a bunch of values when it comes to, we can create all sorts of scenarios when it comes to for loops. I'll obviously be making a whole different video. It will just contain exercise when it comes to for loops, while loops. We'll obviously be creating a few programs as well. So yeah, that is how you get started with for loops. And yes, so the other thing that I want to go over is the range function. So let's say for now I defined my list1 as having 4 elements, 1 2 3 4. But what if I want to iterate over a list which has thousands of elements or thousands of numbers? Let's say for argument's sake it has thousands of numbers. I cannot create a custom list by typing it out. It is just not possible. 0 1 2 3 4 5, you know, I can't go all the way to 1000 by typing it out. What I can do is use the help of the range function. So what the range function does is that it takes 2 arguments. The first number is the starting number and the second number is the end number. And what it does is that it gives us all of the numbers from that starting number till the end number. And if I were to visualize this, let's say I want to wrap this range function inside of my list command. This is what I get. I get a list of all of the numbers in that range function. So let's say our starting number is 0 but the ending number is 10. So I get all of those numbers inside of a list with the starting number, and well, the ending number is not inclusive. That's, yeah. So you guys get the point. If you want to work with huge ranges, huge numbers, huge number list, we will use the range function to help us out in that case. So let's say I want to iterate over the range of 0 to 10. Yeah, for num in range, and that's what I do. I don't need to define any sort of list. I can just directly say range 0 to 5. I want Python to print num. That's it, and this is what I get. We don't need to define a manual list ourselves. If we have a certain set of numbers, if we know the range, that range can be from starting from 0 till any number at the end. We can we can use the range function to help us out in that regard. So yeah, that was it for that was the basics of for loops and the range function. The other thing I would like to go over is the while loop. So the while loop, what the while loop does is that it keeps on executing a certain statement until a specific condition is met. So what do I mean by that is that let's say I define a variable 5 and I type out while I is less than let's say 0, which is not the case. I want to, or you just make it 20, sorry, I apologize. Print I. So what this statement over here is doing is that it takes it assigns an integer 5 to variable I. Then what this while loop over here, this statement over here does is that it says while I is less than 20, keep on running this particular statement of print I until I fails or refuses to be less than 20. But the thing is that we are not changing that value of I, so this statement will continue to run. It will continue to run. It will run infinite amount of times unless we interrupt it manually. How do we do that in Jupyter? We go to kernel, we click on interrupt, and this block of code, block of line refuses to run any further. So yeah, but how can we limit it? We will say I is equal to I plus 1. This is what we do. This is what we do. Now as you can see, the statement has run only a specific number of times, and if I were to just print I, yeah, I is, this whole block of code is executed the first time. First time I is 5, so I is printed over here. Then I has incremented by 1, 6, then 6 is less than 20, yes, 7, 8, 9, 10, so on and so forth until we reach the final number of 19. 19 gets printed, 19 plus 1 is 20. Is 20 less than 20? No, the statement is incorrect. This while loop will break and will refuse to run any further. This is what the while loop does, is it keeps on running until and unless a specific condition is met, and only then does the while loop break. So yeah, so we have gone over the very basics of for loops. There's obviously a lot that can be done with while loops and for loops. I'll be going over those details in the coming videos. This is just for someone who's a complete beginner, who's just starting to code out with Python or programming in general. If he's just getting started with programming, this type of introduction suits that individual very well. But I will obviously be going over some extremely detailed and a bit complicated examples to show the significance of the while loop and the for loop in the upcoming videos. So for now, that's pretty much it for while loop and for loops. Moving forward, I would like to go over how to create a custom function. So we already know the print statement, the while loop, the for loop, all everything that we've done. But let's say I don't want to repeat a block of code every time I want to run it. I just want to call a particular function, give it that value, and the block of code runs. I don't want to type that block of code each and every single time. What do I mean by that is that, for example, I take a value x is equal to 1, y is equal to 3, and z is equal to x plus y, and e is equal to z times 3, z to the power 3, and print e. So this particular statement performed a few mathematical operations. X was added to y, and then after that the result was stored in the value in a variable z, and then z was taken as the power 3. The thing is that if I want to repeat this block of code for different values of x and y, what I can do is that I can keep on copying and pasting this, and changing the values over here. That will work as well, but I can also store all of this inside of a function. And what do I mean by that is, I will define a function my underscore func. I'll call it my underscore func for my function, and I will give it two variables x and y, and I will take all of this code. You know what, I'll just type it out. I'll say z is equal to x plus y, e is equal to z times 3, print e, z to the power 3, print e. So now if I want to repeat this block of code over here, I don't need to copy and paste this block of code into new cells each and every single time. What I can simply do is that I can just call my func, and I can pass values for my x and y. Okay, I think I misspelled it. It's yeah, that is how it's supposed to work. I can even much easier. Obviously these 4 lines, you guys might be thinking that, oh, we can just copy these are just 4 lines. Well, the thing is that once your code tends to become extremely large, I'm just executing 2 to 3 mathematical operations. An additional operator, I'm just performing an addition operation. I'm also performing a multiplication operation, z to the power of 3. But once your code becomes extremely large, it becomes very hard to keep on copying it every single time. So and it also becomes very a bit complicated to refer back to it every single time. So this is where functions come in, and they are extremely handy in that regard. So let's say I say my underscore func again, but this time I pass in big value, and I get my underscore func 90 and 78. So the other thing is that right now this particular value is being printed onto the screen, because we have told Python that in this function the result of e should be printed. But the thing is that we are not storing the value of e. Once this value has been printed, it's not being stored somewhere. How can we store a specific value? Well, the thing is that instead of and I'll just probably type it out again, x comma y, I'll say z is equal to x plus y. I will say return z. So what return z does is that it will return the value of z, but it will allow us to store that value. Over here we were just printing it, we are not storing it somewhere, but over here we can actually store that value. So what do I mean by that is that I'll define a new variable by the name of someone. I'll say my underscore function 3, 7 someone, and I get value of someone 10. 7 plus 3 is 10. This is where the significance of functions comes in. I could have also I could have copied this z square x plus y line over here. I could have said z is equal to 3 plus 7, and then someone is equal to z. That would have been possible, but this type of operation, these type of tasks tend to become tedious if the code becomes large. That is why functions are extremely important. So yeah, print just prints that particular value onto the screen, whereas return allows us to store that value. So our result from my underscore function, because of the fact that we told Python to return that value, has been stored inside of sum1. So the last thing that I want to go over is list comprehension. So what is list comprehension? Let's say I have a list by the name of list2. Okay, and I think I defined list1 earlier. So what is list1? Yeah, list1 has 4 elements, 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to perform an operation in list2. I can do it using a for loop as well. Initially I did use a for loop, but let's say I want to append each and every element of list1 to list2. I want to append each and every element of list1 into list2. Sorry, I just repeated myself over there. But I want to take that particular element and take the power of the element time to the power of 2. I can do that using the for loop. I did that using the for loop. Let's see how we can do that using a list comprehension. I will say num power 2 for num in list 1. I'll say list 2. I get, oh, this was supposed to be list 2. Yeah, 1, 4, 9, 16. We can do this the same way in using a for loop as well. For values in list 1, list 2 dot append values power 2. Yes, list 2. Okay, apparently this was what list 2 was referred to. I'll probably define LU list 3. Okay, okay, I think I probably, yeah, sorry for the confusion. Yeah, but you guys get my point. So using list comprehension or using a for loop, you guys can get the same task done, but it depends entirely up to you what your choice is, what you guys are comfortable with. Either it's a list comprehension or whether it's using a direct conventional for loop. So yeah, that was this is pretty much it for this video. I went over the basics of for loops. I went over the range function. I also covered the while loop. Obviously not in as much detail, but in the next videos I'll be going over a few exercises which will probably get you guys extremely comfortable when it comes to for loop and while loop. And I also went over list comprehension, but list comprehension is something that you guys have a choice. You can either use a conventional for loop or list comprehension. It depends entirely up to you. And I also went over how to create a custom function. So hope you guys like this video. If you do give me a like, to share this video with your colleagues, with your friends, and I'll see you guys in the next video.